So how does addiction take over our mind and our body and our actions? Addiction really does provide us with a real paradox because it shows us the limits of our free will. We see quite clearly how we are not the director of our consciousness. Our consciousness can become consumed, if not possessed, by these psychic elements, these psychological aspects, these cravings. And we find ourselves caught in this autopilot where we know what we're doing is futile, but we do it anyway because there's some kind of memory or a deeply ingrained habit of pleasure seeking, which has become associated with the addiction. Because all addictions really, they provide us this feeling, this fleeting feeling of pleasure, a fleeting feeling of relief. And that's why we do it, because we want to do more of that thing that makes us feel good. Even if that thing that makes us feel good is ultimately destructive to our body and our mind. So what do we do with these feelings, these cravings that arise within our consciousness? How do we respond to them without indulging in them? A craving, it comes with it a kind of pressure, a kind of coercion to do that thing. And we repeat the cycle of addiction by, of course, feeling as though we're powerless to resist it, by just allowing ourselves to become swept up in the loop of addiction. Think of any sort of bad habit that you do, any kind of addiction, whether it be gambling or food or drugs or sex, whatever thing that sort of allows you to escape from yourself. Notice how often in periods of boredom or periods of stress, we feel in those moments a subtle inkling to do the addiction, because we know the addiction, or we've been conditioned to believe that the addiction will provide us a reliable source of bliss, a reliable source of happiness. And it's obviously when we're in states of mind where we feel like shit or we feel negative, it's in those states where we crave most intensely a kind of escape from that bad feeling. And of course, depending on how deeply embedded the addiction is in our psyche, the first response that we do to resolve a bad situation is to look towards the addiction, is to look towards that short-term plastering over of the ailments, the sicknesses within our mind. Now, I want to guide our conversation towards a meditation on what we should do in those moments of weakness, where we feel the subtle bubbling up, the pressure cooker of our cravings sort of rearing its presence into our awareness. I want to give you some kind of meditations to do that will help you ultimately to understand the way these cravings arise in our consciousness, and as well to develop this ability to resist them, develop this ability to be able to witness the trajectory of our cravings, the trajectory of that pressure that bubbles up within us, and to be able to witness it from a distance. Now, ultimately, what I'm describing is a kind of yogic technique for being able to calm and still the mind when it is disrupted by something. Now, what we do when we listen to the craving and then act on the craving by getting the addiction thing, what we're doing, we are trying to calm our mind. We are trying to quell that agitation that is stirred by the addiction, by the craving. We think of our mind as this still, steady, flowing lake. The craving sort of arises up like a sort of a rock that is thrown in the lake, and it creates all these ripples, all these disruptions. And, when we see all those disruptions, those disruptions to our peace, we immediately start thinking. It's an interesting little flicker from the light. We immediately start thinking, how do we reestablish peace? And obviously, when we're in the state of addiction, the addict complex within us will stir within us certain thoughts, certain rationalizations, certain feelings of, well, the addiction will help us. The addiction will help remedy that agitation. Why don't we just do that? It'll be quick. It'll be easy. We know from our memory that it works, quote unquote. And so the mind will start conjuring up certain directions, certain orientations for us to do. How do we get the addiction? How do we get our fix? The way we overcome all of that is to ultimately discover within us a way of stilling our mind that does not require the addiction, that does not require going out into the world and relying upon some kind of external means of quelling an internal dissatisfaction. And ultimately, how we still the mind is through meditative and yogic techniques. We often don't describe it as that, but ultimately we have to somehow learn and figure out how do we cultivate and conjure up our own inner fountain of joy, our own inner fountain of peace that is not dependent upon external things. Because when we attach our happiness and our well-being to external objects, we become slaves to those external objects. We begin to believe deeply within our mind and our psyche that we need these things to be happy. And when we believe that, obviously when we don't have that thing, when we don't have that thing that we are oh so deeply attached to, we will experience distress, we will experience a profound dysregulation of our mood and our well-being. We will experience sadness, emptiness, a lack of meaning. It's kind of like what happens when you tear a child from their mother. You're breaking that attachment bond. You're creating that separation anxiety, and we experience that separation anxiety when we're separated from our crutch, because our brain and our mind has learned to associate that drug or that addiction object with peace, with contentment, with safety, with euphoria, with bliss. We have trained our mind to believe that. Now, of course, the addiction object is like a toxic mother, We believe that it is nourishing, but ultimately, when you really look at it clearly and distinctly from an objective lens, it is not nourishing us. It is, in fact, degrading us. It may provide us these fleeting splurts of nourishment, but that is balanced out by a profound degradation of our body and our mind and our spirit. So what we do, we get repeatedly swept up in the illusion of the addiction. That is why we continue to indulge in it, because we believe that this time it will be fine, that there won't be side effects. We believe so strongly that that will be the case. And for a brief moment, that belief is confirmed by reality, because we indulge and we feel that surge of euphoria, and then we live in this dream world whereby the addiction solves all of our problems. But that dream world obviously does not last forever. We wake up, we experience the come down, we confront reality as it is, and we feel this deep apathy and depression. And at a certain point in the repeated cycling of addiction, we come to realize that the addiction is not solving anything. It's just allowing us to escape from our problems. And when we reach that point, that's when we're ready to truly introspect. That's when we're ready to truly meditate upon what we are running away from. What are we numbing ourselves out of experiencing? And this is the beginning of shadow work. This is the beginning of the process whereby we start to acknowledge all of the things we've been repressing and ignoring and obscuring ourselves from looking at, because often these things are painful. And when we look at it, it frightens us. And so we want to avoid looking at it. And we avoid it by indulging in fleeting, transient pleasures. Pleasure becomes a distraction. Hedonism becomes our orientation to life. And this can work for a while, but at a certain point, it is the nature of the human being to yearn for something more, to question its existence, to question its current state of reality and whether this is the highest form of reality. We are always looking towards better things, more peaceful ways of being. We always want to move towards things that feel good. But of course, in the process of addiction, that pursuit of feeling good is based on illusion. Because the feeling of good is not permanent, it is short term. If we want to experience true bliss, true enlightenment, true realization, we have to pursue forms and sources of bliss that are not transient, that are not conditioned, that are not dependent upon external things. We have to discover and cultivate within us a permanent, a long-lasting form of bliss, a long-term form of bliss. And that's ultimately the meaning of a yogic life, a life that is oriented towards truth and realization and the discovery of an inner source of bliss, an inner source of peace that is not dependent upon fleeting external pleasures. Now that's a whole different discussion, talking about the more yogic underpinnings of addiction and how we remedy addiction, and I will talk about that in another video. But I hope everything that I've been speaking about now is of some use to you people out here. That's been good. I hope it's been insightful. Like and subscribe if that has resonated with you guys, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye, adios, and peace.